This video is to introduce the module Organisational Architecture. My name is Bruce Holland. I'm the author of the book Cracking Great Leaders and designer of the Cracking Great Leader program. This module is slightly different from most of the others in that it's really designed mostly for the top level people who can really do something around designing and changing an organisation quite fundamentally. So I guess it's targeted at boards and board members, very senior managers. It's for consultants who are consulting in this area around organisational design. It's for organisational development experts and other people who need help in designing their organisation. It will also, though, be very useful to you as the organisational development person to be able to understand these concepts and to be able to communicate them to the senior people in the organisation to give you far more credibility. So I see organisational architecture very much like an architect designing a house. When an architect designs a house, they have a relatively limited number of options, such as bungalows and high-rises and so on. And in designing an organisation, it's quite similar. There are really only 4 designs that are possible, and we'll go on to that a bit later on. Architects also have to think about the environment. For example, I live in Wellington, and earthquake strength is very important in a house design. The owner's preference can be quite important too. I remember really well going through all the scientific and theoretical reasons why a manufacturer that I was working with should have a certain design. But in the end, the manager-owner, who had inherited the business from his father, decided to keep things going just as his old dad had them because he saw himself as part of the family tradition. What's already on site can be really important. Sometimes large structures are already in sight and it's a matter of making adjustments or additions to them. And it's a bit the same with organisational development. Organisations may want to become much more creative, say, but if their people and their culture is operational, then the gap is probably just too wide to bridge. And then finally, architects strive to get balance and design elements fitting together. They need to fit and feel right. And organisational development's like that too. Organisational development is partly science and partly art. I can certainly help you with the science part, and your experience over time will help you with the art part. So the reasons why you should use this module, especially with these senior people, is because if you don't have good design, you get a hit and miss type organisation. Elements of the organisation fight against each other. It's not just that they don't fit together neatly, it's they actually work against each other and can drastically reduce the amount of value that comes out of the whole. The organisation may simply not be fit for purpose, and you get unnecessary complexity. In some organisations, working can be like walking through thick mud or having spider webs that hold you back because processes and technology and culture and the politics of the organisation can be just so complex that the whole thing grinds to a halt. And the obvious result is less profit. The elements that are in this module are design options, environmental situation, the owner's preference, what's already on site, balance and harmony, and 22 profit models. We'll go through these quickly. So the design options, essentially there are really only 4 design options. You can have an organisation which is essentially rational, that's that blue quadrant. Think of major universities, think of accounting organisations, think of research organisations. Quite rational left brain thinking type. You can have left brain, more intuitive type organisations where systems and processes are much more important. Think of McDonald's, who can produce a hamburger anywhere in the world in 6 minutes. Or you can have more right brain organisations, innovative organisations, this yellow type quadrant. And they tend to be more right brain thinking approaches. They're the great designers, the great innovators. Think of Apple Computer, think of Peter Jackson's Wingnut Studios, think of 3M. And then you have the right brain intuitive. These are organisations that intuit their customers' needs extraordinarily well and probably know their customer's business better than the customer knows it. So the module will give you a questionnaire to go through to work out which is the most likely design option for your organisation. And partly it depends on the environmental situation into which the organisation is being designed. On the bottom here you have an environment that's technically fairly certain. I mean, we know what's likely to happen. But up the top here we have a technically uncertain environment. Over here, people generally agree and understand on this left-hand side how to work in that environment, how to solve problems. But over on the right-hand side, people are much less certain about the environment. So down here in this green quadrant, we have this repetitive environment where the past is a good indicator of the future, and essentially the problems are managerial type problems. Up here, where it gets a bit more technically uncertain, but still fairly people certain, we get an engineering type environment where a lot more skill is required to be able to produce the products, but essentially there's agreement about how to do it. Over here we have uncertainty around the people thing. Essentially technically fairly certain. These tend to be political environments. Issues can't be solved without the help of other organisations taking outsiders with you. They're political type problems we're trying to solve. And up in this yellow quadrant, we get the what we call the wicked environment, where the issues are complex and probably never been solved before. So we have to think in quite different sorts of ways, and the environment requires much more innovation. So this chart maps quite nicely onto the previous chart. It's also, though, important when you're thinking about designing an organisation to know what's already on site. One of the key messages is that culture trumps strategy. So if your organisation is very green, very process-driven, very operational, and your strategy is to become very yellow, very innovative, the chances are the culture will stop you from achieving your strategy. Balance and harmony in organisation development are extraordinarily important. And there are a whole series, 12 in fact, elements of an organisation that you need to get in balance and pulling together in exactly the same way. Because you can see from the first boat here, if people aren't pulling in the same way, actually you don't go forward. But if we can get people pulling together and in harmony and all elements pulling together, 12 things need to be pulling together, otherwise they'll start fighting against each other and the organisation will simply grind to a halt. This module helps you work out what are the 12 elements and how to get them so that they work together. And finally in the module are 22 profit models. Now most people, in my experience, think that profit somehow or rather magically comes out of an organisation once it's in place. But actually you need to design in a series of profit models. Typically in my experience, most organisations going through this can capture 5 or 6 profit models that are really important, and once they start to see how these profit models work, they can start to make them stronger and they can build strengths around them. So I've just given you one of the 22 here, the switchboard profit model. So essentially what it says is that buyers, there's only 3 here, but usually in a marketplace there may be thousands of buyers and there may be thousands of sellers. And if these buyers and sellers all have to have a relationship with each other, the transaction costs, the linkages between them become enormously complex. And the profit zone profit model is one where the organisation positions itself so that it can come in between and become a switch for that. So imagine instead of being thousands of relationships, there needs to be only a couple of hundred relationships, all coming in through the switch, dramatically reducing the complexity and adding enormous value to the marketplace. And where you add value to the marketplace is a profit zone. People will pay you if you can add value to the marketplace. Okay, so how this module adds value, essentially it helps organisations become much more focused, clear about where they're trying to go, faster because things are pulling together, and more flexible because we've often taken away a lot of the complexity and the things that are holding people in place rather than helping them be open and creative. It drastically increases the surface area of the organisation, puts more people out close to the customer, and it's at that surface area where enormous value is added. The workplaces improve because people can understand how they can work together more effectively without complexity. It becomes like unbounded human energy. Energy is often bound up in an organisation by rules and processes and procedures, many of which are unnecessary. And designing a proper organisation helps eliminate the unnecessary bits. It ends up with everything pulling together, all those 12 elements that I spoke about earlier. And of course, the final result is much more profit. So don't let your organisation be hit and miss. Design something that's going to give you a lot more profit. Your next steps are to download the readings and become very familiar with them. You need to download the process and understand the process. Deliver the module and collect your revenue way, way faster. I mean, what I'm giving in this module has taken me literally a lifetime to understand and to document. So my call to action is to buy the module, especially if you're working with senior managers or you want to increase your credibility about how organizations work and how the various levers can be pulled so that you get a great organization, way beyond just leadership development. The module will explain all you need for a successful workshop, the readings, the exercises, and the process, and it is a process that works. I find actually that I use the information in this module more when I'm talking one-to-one with a manager, and they end up thinking, wow, this guy Bruce Holland really knows his stuff. He is an expert on how organizations work. He's an organizational architect, if you like. I know I can trust him with this small piece because he's got this big picture about how all the parts work. And I guess if that's the only thing that comes out of this module for you, is your credibility to sell the various other parts of the module, then that's been well worthwhile. But often you're able to work with boards and senior managers around strategy, and you can do this in a much more integrated and holistic type way than if you follow the traditional strategic planning processes. This may be one of the most important modules in the Cracking Great Leaders program, so take it, use it, and make it your own.